My name's Corinne. Today we're going to be doing a get ready with me while talking about kind of an introduction to IndyCar. If you're looking for me just doing this makeup look, which is going to be for a business lunch, and then I'm going to do a wear test, I'm going to do a separate cut of this video with just that information. But let's get started. Oof. Start with this. So the reason I'm doing this is, and I've already primed my face with the Charlotte Tilbury primer. The reason I'm doing this is I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of F1 fans who are moving to watch IndyCar. If you don't watch racing and you're watching this to have a chatty get ready with me in the background, I'm talking about two different motorsports right now. We're going to start with Formula One because it's not like the least knowledge that we need to talk about in this video, but essentially Formula One is the top, hold on, that would be smart to not leave those on there. That's reality. It's the top tier of single-seater motor racing. So essentially, that's international. Formula One, there's only one guy in the car the whole entire time. And they go to 5 out of 7 continents, excluding Africa and Antarctica. And they race in 21 different countries with 24 different races. I don't know if I said that. Formula One kind of gained a second life with the rise of Drive to Survive, which is a reality show on Netflix. So if you don't watch this and you're watching this for makeup and you're kind of like, oh, what she's talking about is sort of interesting, but you're a reality TV person, I'm not. You can go on Netflix and watch Drive to Survive. I've seen like 7 or 8 episodes. Mostly about like my favorite driver, not really because I'm like out here a reality show person. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying that, but yeah, so most people know that. On Drive to Survive, there is somebody who does commentary for it, and his name is Will Buxton. Will Buxton's been doing reporting mostly like color commentary, so there's a difference between calling a race and color commentary. So if you watch any other sport, so there's normally like 2 or 3 people who are telling you what's going on in the sport. If you're watching like WNBA, MLB, that sort of thing, football, or even if you're watching like the Olympics, so like there are people always talking to tell you what's happening, or like they're explaining something if you're not good at it. Ooh, I forgot to do this out of order. No, where is it? Okay. And so one of the more known ones in Formula One is Will Buxton. Will actually previously worked for F1 TV, which is the better broadcast you can get in the United States. However, you have to pay for it. It's not included in like basic cable. So if you're like a new Formula One fan, when the season starts, you might want to like do like a 2-week free trial if they have that, to kind of see what I'm talking about, because it's a little bit easier to follow as an American. But Will is on Formula One TV, and he's also like one of the main voices in Drive to Survive. I'm not the biggest Will fan, but I mean, most people aren't the biggest Will fan. It's not like he's a driver, but he's really helped propel the sport to new levels, and I do have to respect him for that. And I also own his book. I haven't finished it, but he released a book last year. I keep saying I feel so bad. So now we're going to move on to kind of what's happening. And if you are a Will Buxton fan, this is kind of where things get interesting. So there's a second sport that Will is moving to from one to the other, and that is IndyCar. IndyCar is a single-seater racing sport, but it's based primarily in North America. So right now there are I think I wrote this down. There are 17 races, 16 out of 17 are in, and that's just because I forget sometimes when I say there's like 20, because I'm used to Formula One. There are 17 races, 16 out of 17 are in the US, and then 1 is in Canada. So it runs from early March to late August, pardon me. And the main difference that happens, and part of this is something that is kind of controversial if you don't actually know IndyCar, is that it's kind of like if you were in like baseball going from like the American League to the National League, because it's just a different style of playing, but it's still the same rough sport. The main difference is that a lot of Formula One fans look down on IndyCar, which is pointless in my opinion. They are maybe not equal in how they're presented, but we'll get into that. So, like I said, mostly in the United States, over 6 months. The Formula One season now is kind of a behemoth. It starts preseason testing in February this year, I think, or early March, and then it'll end in December with somewhat of a spring break, a month summer break, and then a couple weeks for a fall break. But there's no big gap. So these guys are kind of essentially working 10 months a year. If you exclude January and then you exclude the month off for summer break. And they do have like other responsibilities in that time period too. It's not like, woohoo! So they have post-season testing. So IndyCar is a bit different. And last year, primarily IndyCar had been broadcast on NBC or Peacock. And this was kind of a headache if you're trying to get into IndyCar because like you have to like look up the schedule and not everything's on the same thing every time. And it's just, it's not easy. At least with Formula One, if you're watching F1 TV, you just turn on F1 TV. If you're watching it on Sky Sports, which is what they broadcast on ESPN, it is kind of a pain because then you got to figure out which ESPN channel ESPN has decided to give us today, which is very annoying. It's very annoying, which is one of the reasons I got F1 TV because I was over it. I was over everything. I watched preseason testing and then I was like, I'm done. So IndyCar and NBC had been partners for a very, very long time. Beginning of last year, the rights came up for sale because essentially you have to pay for the broadcast rights and you make a deal that's beneficial to both. The other major motorsport in the United States is NASCAR. I live in Charlotte, which is the home of NASCAR. And I don't really like NASCAR. I don't like that style of car, and I don't like what they're doing with it, but that's a different story together. So I don't watch NASCAR. But again, I will say Fox, who has the NASCAR broadcasting rights, does a lot better of a job with the broadcast. They do a lot better job of promoting it, of engaging it. And so I think it's the middle of last year of 2024, it came out that Fox was going to take over the IndyCar broadcast. And it was kind of a big deal because with NBC, there were kind of three main guys rotating around. One is James Hinchcliffe. If you don't watch Formula One, but you do watch Dancing with the Stars, you probably know Hinch from a couple seasons ago where he came as runner-up. Hinch also does commentary on F1 TV when it's not IndyCar season, and he does drive at certain points. He's a previous IndyCar driver. He's honestly so professional. He's so, I just love Hinch. I saw him twice when I went to Las Vegas Grand Prix, and I was too nervous to stop him because he was going into the track, and I was like, oh my god. But he's got to go to work, and I'm very passionate about letting people who need to do their job. I don't want you to stop for me. And nobody else notices you. So like, if I'm stopping you, that means somebody else is gonna stop you, and they're not gonna get you. You're not gonna get to work on time, and that's like. I just want to respect. If it was like casually walking in Vegas, I might have said something. And then there's Townsend Bell. I'm not a huge T-Bell fan because he has a very love for a driver who I cannot stand. But it's not like he's bad. He tends to ping off of Hinch a lot. So if you're like listening and you don't really get sports, it's kind of like when you're listening to two people go back and forth on a broadcast and one has one opinion and the other has the other opinion. And they're respectful of each other, but they definitely do not have the same opinion. That is Hinch and Tebow. And then the third person is Kevin Lee. Kevin is an incredible broadcaster, has a really long history in calling motorsports across different motorsports, not just IndyCar. But there were some rumors, because they only announced the IndyCar announcer lineup this week, that Kevin was not going to be broadcasting, and that came to be true. Instead, Will is leaving Formula One and coming to IndyCar. And I will say, one thing I do really like about Will is he has consistently talked up IndyCar, even on the F1 broadcast. Like, he does know the sport. He's not coming in like Ted Lasso, okay? Like, he does actually know what's going on, and he's not running a team. But it is kind of sad to see Kevin go. I'm not gonna lie, I know why they kept Townsend, but I would have loved to have heard a Kevin Hinch Will booth, because I think Kevin would have annoyed Will in like the funniest way. Not like Kevin's annoying, but I just kind of know Will, and I think that not like Will's just a kind of a character, and so sometimes having multiple really big characters, and Hinch is kind of a character too, but in a different way. Hinch is like the class clown, and Will is kind of like the class president sort of archetype of a person. So all of this to kind of say there's just been a lot of struggle, and it's kind of been a big, not like a huge surprise to IndyCar fans that this is happening, because the rumors have been going on for a while that Kevin's not going to be on the broadcast this year. But it does seem like a lot of F1 fans have been curious as to why Will is leaving. So, like I said, getting back to the whole point, IndyCar's all on one continent. You're not flying around doing a bunch of stuff. The season is significantly shorter, so if Will wanted to go back to Formula One, I don't think he is. His announcement made it really clear that he was walking away from F1 TV, which is going to be a huge change for F1 TV. I don't know if they're going to put Barretto in, or if they're going to promote Ruth to do that, which would be my preference. But it's just kind of a huge question mark that I think a lot of F1 fans are like, oh my god, we're so kind of sick of Will. But I do think Will has a place, especially on the F1 TV broadcast, and we'll see the change come into place, and there'll be a dialogue. But essentially, Will has a family. I think he only has one kid, but he does have a wife. And a lot of the guys, because IndyCar is primarily men, Catherine Legg drives in the 500, and then sometimes they'll slap them in the car. But essentially it just makes sense for him to come into the sport, because a lot of the guys have young kids. It's not like, I think only Hulk has a kid, and then Max obviously is about to have a kid. Well, Kelly's about to have a kid. Max will be the father of that child. But, like, there's not a lot of dads right now. We're seeing an influx of young men and not a lot of dads. Whereas with IndyCar, like, it's a kind of a bunch of dads. And a bunch of older drivers. So with Formula One, they kind of dunk on Fernando, and now Lewis is now 40, about being a little old. But IndyCar, it tends to be a nice blend. Like, a lot of the old dogs are still out there fighting, which I think is pretty interesting. And IndyCar is going to go through a big change this year, so I do think if you're a new fan, this will be interesting. So nothing about, like, the core tenets of the sport's changing. But, like, they've signed a, what's it called? My brain is forgetting the word. Charter, there we go. So that's going to change a lot. IndyCar, it used to be, if you're not performing, I'm yanking you out of the car, and good luck with your life, which was the narrative of last year. But I think they've limited how many drivers you can do that with now with the charter, and IndyCar's kind of all over the place, and what I mean by that is we kind of think of Formula One as like driving on the edge or whatever. If F1 if there are 10 kids in a class, F1 are the 5, show up on time, does their homework, performs well. IndyCar are the 5 that are like, wow, how are they in the top 10 of this class? Because they are all over the place. With Formula One, there are rules and regs, and I think that's kind of what they're trying to do with the charter. NASCAR did a charter, and there's a lot of mixed feelings about that. But, yeah, so there's, essentially, with Formula One, you have the weekend, either it's a sprint weekend or it's not, and qualifying is qualifying. IndyCar, and then with Formula One, if your car breaks down, you go in and your race is done. IndyCar is not like that. There are, just like with Formula One, there are multiple styles of tracks. There's a road track, which is a traditional track, a street track, and then an oval. And I do want you to know, if you're starting to watch this and you're like, an oval? Why the heck would I want to watch an oval race? They're actually very entertaining. My first IndyCar race I really paid the whole attention to, like spent the whole weekend watching, was the Indy 500 last year. There's a little bit in the middle it gets boring, but that's with any race. The last 2 laps of the 500 last year, my heart was in my throat. My heart monitor was like Brazil 2023, which is like one of my favorite races I've ever seen live or ever watched. Like it just, because I'm a huge Fernando Alonso fan. And IndyCar is just kind of unique in the fact that not only do they change the style of tracks, like having 3 instead of 2, but they also change their qualifying a lot, which I think Formula One could learn from. And what I mean by that is, like, sometimes qualifying is like traditional, sometimes it's not. IndyCar will, something I think is really interesting is IndyCar will time the practices and then do qualifying split up. So like these 10 people went within this time frame, so they're gonna go for qualifying 1, level 1, group 1. These 10 people went this speed, so they're gonna go for qualifying 1, group 2. Then they start to mesh them together. And then on certain tracks, primarily ovals, they'll just like you get 1 lap or 2 laps. So you do a warm-up lap, you get 1 lap, you get a second lap, and then you're done. Which I think could be really beneficial for tracks like Monaco, mostly Monaco. I think them doing that at Monaco would drive engagement, because then it's truly like whoever's able to put together a lap will be up front. It's not, oh, so-and-so's car is best. No, you don't get a chance to screw up. Your fans get to watch you by yourself on the streets of Monaco doing a lap, and you succeed or you fail. And I think that would be super interesting, because that's part of what makes IndyCar races interesting to me, is sometimes the qualifying is smart, sometimes it's not. And like I said, IndyCar is going through a lot of changes. Sorry, I need to stay on track. IndyCar is going through a lot of changes. And what I mean by that is this year they're introducing an 11th team, which is Prisme. They're adding the charter. And then last year this is something Formula One could never pull off. Last year in the middle of the season, IndyCar changed their engines. And they went to a hybrid engine. Like they went from whatever engine it was to a hybrid engine. And it completely changed the season. So we're going to see a lot of differences in the cars this year because of that. Essentially, the back half of the season last year, they had a break for the Olympics because they were on NBC, which most of the guys seem to really enjoy. Let me just see. Yeah, August 31st. But they all came back and they had a little bit more time to like sit with the car and think about it. So you'll see a lot of that on top of the charter, because people are going to have to be really careful with who they swap out. Last year there was a driver that got swapped out who ended up coming back and doing a really incredible job. And he'll be back this year. So that's pretty good. It's just going to be very interesting to see how things shake out. With Will coming in, with this charter, with an 11th team. And essentially the charter is going to just limit a lot of stuff, which will be very interesting. So if you're coming in this season being a Will Buxton fan, not like you've picked the best season to do it, because it's going to be all new everything. But it is a pretty good season to start watching IndyCar because of that. So if you're watching this, and of course everybody's biased in motor journalism, let's call a spade a spade. Everyone is biased in motor journalism. There's not a single... actually, let me not lie. Hinch does try. I really commend Hinch for giving it the good old college try every weekend to be... Like, his best friend is still an IndyCar driver, and that man tries his best every weekend to be as non-biased as possible. But... So essentially whoever you watch, I don't know who Will's favorites in IndyCar are. So, but it could be anybody. Last year's winner, and I think he has 4 championships now, is a man named Alex Palou. He is from Spain. Alex grew up in the same karting system that everybody else does. Alex is a very interesting character. He's still in a lawsuit with McLaren because he's with Chip Ganassi Racing, which is one of 11 teams. The 11 teams are kind of split between Honda engines and Chevy engines. Not too dissimilar from Formula One with like Mercedes engines and whatever, but Formula One has a little bit more variety. IndyCar doesn't. As of right now. And Alex was supposed to be at McLaren with the good old Zach Brown. We're going to see some characters. But he walked away, went to Chip Ganassi, and that's where he's been. So there's been a bit of a, I don't know, I can't remember if they settled it or not. But Alex has won with Chip. Alex likes being there. And then we have AJ Foyt. There are a lot of like smaller teams that are owned by like previous drivers. And then there's like Andretti Global. If you're a Formula One fan, I do think if you get into this, you're going to want to pay attention to Andretti Global, because that'll be Cadillac in 2026. Their primary driver is a man named Colton Herta. If I was Andretti Global right now, and honestly, I am going to call them Andretti. If I was Andretti looking to go into 2026, I would be calling Gene Haas right now. The phone would be off the hook with Gene Haas or James Vowles. I would say, how much money will it take, which is Group 1001, which is the main backer, who is Colton's main backer. How much money will it take to get this driver on weekends where he does not have IndyCar races into your car so that he can qualify for his super license? Because there's a huge issue with pushbacks with IndyCar drivers having points. I think it's ridiculous. Honestly, if this man can win races and make money from winning races, he should be able to qualify for a super license. As somebody who's watched both sports, IndyCar does not have the rules that Formula One has. If your car breaks down, but you get back to the garage, if the mechanics can fix the car, you're going back out. That's literally like 2 different races last year. I saw the winner of the race have that happen in the first couple of laps. It's not like if the marshals touch your car, you're out. Like, it's not a black flag. Like, it's not like anything goes, but it does kind of feel like anything goes. And I think that's why the FIA hates it so much, is because it's a lot more freedom to do what you want to do. So like I said, 11 teams. The big ones are Andretti, Arrow McLaren, Penske. Roger Penske owns IndyCar. And yeah, he does have a team. There was a bit of a scandal last year because they were cheating. But then there are like, who else? Chip Ganassi. Those are like the bigger ones. And then of course there are smaller ones. Teams can either be of 2 or 3 drivers. Another thing you might like about IndyCar is that team orders are banned. So all of the fun little team order moments, you can't tell your driver to do anything. Like, they're just chilling. Then the big names, I'm going all over the place. The big names are Alex Palou, and then we have a couple of returning winners. So Scott Dixon, Will Power, and yeah, that man's name is Will Space Power. Honestly, Will Power is hysterical to me. But he has like I'm warming up my eyelash color, by the way. He's a really great story. Will almost quit racing because his wife got ill a couple years ago. And he is a character. And that's the other reason I say F1 people are really straight-laced in compared to IndyCar, because, like, and I'm not a Max Verstappen fan. Max couldn't cut it in IndyCar. I'm going to be honest with you, because we'll be throwing them birds, like, it ain't no problem. And then Joseph Newgarden. Joseph Newgarden won the 500 last year. Joseph Newgarden is like, as somebody says, Penske perfect. Joseph Newgarden, there is this really great edit of him to, like, I think it's Look What You Made Me Do. He is wild. not like a party wild, not like Jensen Button wild, but he's just so, he's so American. He's just so, like, he's so funny. And then other big guys, like I said, Pato Award, Colton Herta. So Pato with Arrow McLaren, Colton Herta with Andretti. Then you have David Malukas. I think David's with Meyer Shank. David has such an interesting story. He also has a very interesting social media presence. Right before the holidays, somebody posted this meme that was really weird about David being eaten by a pelican. And then he came back from his holiday break and said, finally managed to make it out of the pelican's mouth, which... I can't with him. I'm sorry. But a lot of people in the broadcast call him Little Dave because he's little. He's very young. And then the final one is Scotty Mack. Scott McLaughlin is on Team Penske. Scott lives in Charlotte, which is where I'm from, because his wife's from Charlotte. And he is just... I know that a lot of people in Formula One talk about the crossover, like, oh, they could just go to IndyCar. They really couldn't. I don't think a lot of these guys would last. I do think Will last because he actually respects it. And I think that there are going to be a lot of Formula One fans, because I think there is an IndyCar reality show. Again, I don't watch reality TV that much, so I watch it when I'm with my best friend Bree. And, like, I've seen a lot of Vanderpump Rules because I worked in a restaurant. But, yeah, I think a lot of people are going to get into it, and I think there's a lot of personality, but you have to respect the sport. You can't come in saying, oh, I'm a Formula One fan, and this is going to suck, but I'm going to watch it anyway. You have to come in with an open mind, because then you will realize that this is, like, the no rules, just right sport. Like, truly. And also something that Formula One doesn't do that IndyCar does are penalties. Like, IndyCar, you screw up, you're going to have a 20-second stop-go. You're gonna go. Like, they've held people for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, I think a minute, but that was Santucci. I hate Santucci. He's banned from Formula One, though, so we can't even have that conversation. And that's part of it, is, like, these guys and Catherine have very interesting stories. And also, like... we're going to have a lot of conversation this year about Cadillac, about who are going to be the drivers for Cadillac. Obviously, Colton's the number one choice. And Pato is signed to Arrow McLaren until 2027. But a lot of people are going to probably think, oh, Pato, especially if you're watching it, like, he's a really great driver. He has really great control. He's not leaving IndyCar till he wins the 500. The 500 is, if you're a new fan, like, the main race in IndyCar. Because like in Formula One, where there are multiple races in the same city, there are 4 races that exist in the same 2 cities. 2 of them are at Mid-Ohio, which are the same week, and so it's not like they're just 2 races consecutively, which is really punishing. Mid-Ohio is a really punishing track, and it's really fun to watch. But 2 are Indianapolis. One is kind of like the warm-up at Indianapolis, and then they're like 2 straight weeks of IndyCar practices for the Indianapolis 500, because there's open entry. Well, not completely open, like I can't go do it, but like there's relatively open entry, and there's one guy, Kyle Larson, who's probably going to do the back-to-back, which is the Indy 500 if he can qualify, and then the Coke 500 here in North Carolina, which I think is so interesting that you can do. But people are always like, in like Indy, da da da. I'm like, you don't understand. The Indy 500, having watched it and having experienced that whole entire weekend, the Indy 500 is like Monza and Silverstone and Monaco all in the same weekend. Like, you cannot compare an Indy, you can't compare any singular Formula One race to the 500. And that's truly crazy. So I feel like I've been all over the place talking about this, but essentially, if you're watching this because you're curious about IndyCar, just know that if you like racing and you come into it with an open mind, you are really, 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 really going to enjoy variety in tracks, the variety in personalities. I think I'm gonna do a video like saying like, we always talk about who could come from Formula 1 to IndyCar and cut it versus who in IndyCar could go to Formula 1. And my biggest issue with that is that like, I don't think a lot of Formula 1 fans could handle the personalities in IndyCar. Because like, you can't even handle like George Russell complaining. These guys are crazy. And also their racing schedule is a little bit easy to follow because it's in EST, or it's in North American time, so for US fan it's a little bit easier to watch. And it's just a little bit less frustrating. Part of my issue with Formula 1 is like their inconsistent stewardship. People are giving fairness, and with IndyCar, like last year when there was a whole Penske drama, Penske just got disqualified. Like it wasn't like a let's go back and forth to the stewards, let's go up and down. They sat on it, they went over it, and they were just disqualified. Which is kind of crazy. But they came back. They did a really interesting end of the season. Yeah, and I'm excited. I don't know if this is going to go well, but at the same time, I think Fox making that decision to bring Will over will bring fans. If you are a Will Buxton fan, if you like Will in general, I do think you're going to enjoy IndyCar because you probably also like Hinch. If you are doing Get Ready With Me makeup, you're probably like, this is the most boring, basic, easy look. Why are we doing this? But it's also a wear test of these products. I'm trying to figure out, I think this looks good, but I'm also going to be wearing red. So I'm trying not to do anything too crazy because I also have to compensate for the fact it's going to be I don't know if I'm going to put lipstick on actually. But yeah. Oh, my hair's looking good. Anyway, if you are, oh god, am I blown out? Okay, hopefully not. If you are a Formula 1 fan moving into IndyCar, welcome. It's going to be a trip unless you really only like the sort of drama. There is drama in IndyCar if you care about that sort of thing. It's just kind of always easily resolvable. There is lore, there is backstories. Like I said, Will Power has a great backstory. Joseph Newgarden has a great backstory. Pato, Colton, like I said, I think Pato, Colton, those are the two people that most people are going to talk about going to Cadillac. I don't think Scott would do it. I don't think either Scott would do it, but I think Scotty Mac would be so much fun in Formula 1. But you also see, you know, like I don't think Dave is able to qualify yet. But there's just a lot of really great motor talent, a lot of really great people. And then I will say one thing. There's a bit of a difference in the broadcast style. It's a little bit more traditionally American, so like they do wear suits and ties. You are able to kind of tell who is who, which I think is really important. There is a lot of advertising in how they call the race, which isn't something that happens in Formula 1. So get used to that. And there also is the national anthem of the United States before every race. I don't remember if it was, I don't think it's in Canada. Maybe they do both, if I'm remembering correctly. And then there's prayer. So if that makes you uncomfortable, don't worry too much about it. If you're watching the broadcast, normally they go on air about 30 minutes before the race. And they don't do the same sort of like formation lap style thing. They just go hop and there's different start styles. Essentially, one thing I will say is they will always explain it to you on the broadcast what's going on. But I mean, it's kind of just, it's just fun. So welcome, Will Buxton fans. If you are watching this and you are like, okay, this makeup's interesting, cool. I don't know what else to say. I feel like this is kind of a basic, easy look, but if you're looking for a basic, easy look that'll last all day, let me show you how it'll last all day. It is currently, what time? 10:02. 10:02. And yes, this is George Russell jumping up and down for joy at the Las Vegas Grand Prix. because that's where I was. I had a great time. All right. I will probably talk to you soon. I got a camera that actually works now, so I'm not having to film it on my phone, which is great. All right. Later. Yeah, see, I look a lot more put together now because I do wear glasses. And thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.